My son invited me to dinner at the Keg in downtown Vancouver. He said he wanted to celebrate my 65th birthday, even though my birthday had been 3 weeks ago. I thought it was strange, but I didn't question it. After losing my wife Margaret to cancer 2 years earlier, I had learned to appreciate any gesture of connection from my family. The restaurant was busy that Friday evening. My son Derek sat across from me, his wife Patricia beside him. They were both smiling in a way that made me feel warm inside. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe things were getting better. "Dad, we ordered your favorite," Derek said. "The sirloin with the baked potato." "You remembered," I said. "Of course I remembered. You've ordered the same thing for 30 years. We laughed. Patricia poured me a glass of wine. Everything felt normal. Everything felt right. Then Derek's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his expression changed. "I need to take this," he said. "It's about the Whistler property. Just give me 2 minutes." He stood up and walked toward the entrance. Patricia excused herself to use the washroom. Suddenly, I was alone at the table, surrounded by the noise of other families enjoying their meals. That's when the old man appeared. He must have been in his 70s, wearing a worn gray cardigan and thick glasses. He had been sitting at the table behind us. I hadn't noticed him until he leaned over and placed something in my hand. It was a business card and $300 in cash. "Mr. Mackenzie," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Walter Chen. I know this sounds insane, but you need to listen to me very carefully." I stared at him. "How do you know my name?" "Because I've been watching your son for 6 months. He's about to do to you what his lawyer did to my father. My father died penniless in a care home in Burnaby while that man lived in his house." My heart started beating faster. "I don't understand what you're talking about." "There's a form in your son's briefcase. He's going to ask you to sign it tonight. He'll tell you it's for updating the beneficiaries on your insurance policy. It's not. It's an application to have you declared mentally incompetent. Once you sign it, you'll lose everything. Your house in North Vancouver, your pension, your hardware store." I shook my head. "That's ridiculous. Derek would never." "Your wife Margaret died on March 15th, 2023. She had a tumor in her brain. You scattered her ashes at Lighthouse Park because that's where you proposed to her in 1982. Your hardware store is called Mackenzie and Son, even though your son has never worked a single day there. You were planning to sell it and retire. But 6 months ago, Derek convinced you to transfer 40% ownership to him instead. He told you it was for tax purposes." I felt the blood drain from my face. Everything he said was true. Every single detail. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've spent 4 years investigating the people who destroyed my father. Your son's lawyer, James Whitmore, is the same lawyer who handled my father's case. He runs a scheme targeting elderly business owners. They identify vulnerable people, usually widowers, and slowly take everything from them using legal documents they don't understand." Derek was walking back toward the table. I could see him through the crowd. "Go to the washroom right now," Walter said urgently. "There's a window in the men's room that leads to the alley. Take a taxi to the address on that card. I'll explain everything there. If you stay, they'll have you committed within the month." "This is crazy. You're asking me to—" "Your daughter-in-law just made a phone call from the washroom." I watched her. She called someone and said, "He's almost ready. Mr. Mackenzie, I know you don't trust me, but ask yourself this. Why did your son suddenly want to celebrate your birthday 3 weeks late? Why tonight? Why at a restaurant instead of at his house, where you could leave whenever you wanted?" Derek was 20 feet away now. "Please," Walter said. "I couldn't save my father. Let me help you save yourself." I looked at the business card. It had an address in East Vancouver and a phone number. Nothing else. Every instinct told me this was insane, that I should stay and confront my son directly, that there must be some explanation. But then I remembered something. 3 days ago, Derek had asked me about my medications. He wanted to know if I was still taking the sleeping pills the doctor prescribed after Margaret died. He said he was worried about me. He asked if I had been forgetting things lately. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. But now, sitting there with $300 in my hand and my son approaching the table, I felt a cold terror spreading through my chest. "Dad," Derek said, sitting down. "You look pale. Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Just need to use the washroom." The wine went right through me. "Of course. Take your time." I stood up slowly, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Walter had already returned to his table and was pretending to read the menu. He didn't look at me as I walked past. The washroom was at the back of the restaurant. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. When I pushed open the door, I saw 3 stalls and a window above the sinks. The window was small, but I was not a large man. Years of working in the hardware store had kept me lean. I climbed onto the counter. My joints protested, but I managed to push the window open. The alley outside was dark and smelled like garbage. I squeezed through the opening, scraping my shoulder on the frame, and dropped onto the wet pavement. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing heavily, wondering if I had lost my mind. Then I started walking. I found a taxi on Commercial Drive and gave the driver the address on Walter's card. He looked at me strangely, probably because I was a 65-year-old man in a dress shirt with dirt on my trousers, but he didn't ask questions. The address led to a small bungalow in a quiet neighborhood. The paint was peeling, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. I paid the driver and walked up the cracked concrete path to the front door. It opened before I could knock. "You came," Walter said. He looked relieved. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure why I did. Because part of you already knew something was wrong. Come in. We have a lot to discuss." The inside of the house was cluttered with boxes and filing cabinets. Every surface was covered with papers, photographs, and newspaper clippings. It looked like the office of a detective who had been working the same case for decades. "This is everything I've collected on James Whitmore and his associates," Walter said. 11 victims that I've confirmed. Your father-in-law would have been the 12th, but Margaret married you instead of the man Whitmore had arranged for her." "What?" Walter handed me a photograph. It showed a younger version of my wife standing next to a man I didn't recognize. Margaret's father owned a commercial property in Richmond. Very valuable. Whitmore's original plan was to have her marry one of his associates, then slowly transfer the property into their name. But Margaret met you instead. She fell in love with you. She refused to go along with the arrangement. Margaret never told me any of this. She probably didn't know the full extent of it, but her father did. He died 3 months after your wedding. Heart attack, they said. Very convenient for Whitmore. I sat down heavily in a chair. My mind was spinning. "Why me?" I asked. "Why now? I'm just a man with a hardware store." "Your hardware store sits on land that's worth $4 million. The city is planning to develop that area. Your son found out about it 8 months ago. He went to Whitmore for advice on how to get the property from you. How do you know all this?" Walter opened one of the filing cabinets and pulled out a thick folder. "Because I've been recording every meeting they've had. I have a contact inside Whitmore's office, a paralegal who owes me a favor. She's been feeding me information for 2 years." He spread the documents across the table. I saw my name on several of them. Mackenzie, Harold J. There were medical assessments I had never taken, statements from doctors I had never met, a psychiatric evaluation that concluded I was showing early signs of dementia. "I never did any of these evaluations," I said. "Of course you didn't. They forged them. That's what they do. They create a paper trail that makes it look like you're losing your mind. Then they have you declared incompetent by a judge who's been taking bribes from Whitmore for 15 years. Once that happens, they become your legal guardians. They sell your assets, keep the money, and put you in a care home where you can't complain to anyone. But I'm fine. I'm completely fine. Any doctor would see that. My father was fine too. He was sharper than me until the day they took him. It doesn't matter if you're actually incompetent. It only matters what the paperwork says." I stared at the documents in front of me. My son's signature was on several of them. Derek Mackenzie. The handwriting I had known since he was a child, learning to write his name. "I don't understand," I said quietly. "I gave him everything. After his mother died, I practically handed him the business. Why would he do this?" Walter sat down across from me. His eyes were sad. "Greed does strange things to people, Mr. Mackenzie. Your son is in debt. Did you know that? He owes over $300,000 to various creditors. His house is mortgaged to the limit. His wife's spending habits have bankrupted them. When he found out about the land value, he saw a way out. "Patricia," I whispered, "she's been so nice to me lately, calling every week, bringing me food, to establish a pattern. So when they tell the judge that you've become increasingly confused and dependent, they'll have witnesses who can confirm it. Oh, poor Harold. We've been so worried about him. He can't even cook for himself anymore. We bring him meals 3 times a week." I thought about all the dinners Patricia had brought over, the casseroles, the soups. I had eaten them gratefully, thinking she was being kind. Now I wondered what else might have been in that food. "The sleeping pills," I said suddenly. "Derek asked about my sleeping pills." Walter nodded. "They were probably planning to claim you've been overusing them, another sign of mental deterioration. Or perhaps they were adding something to your food to make you drowsy, confused. It's a common tactic." I felt sick. I wanted to call my son and scream at him. I wanted to drive to his house and demand an explanation, but I knew that would only make things worse. "What do I do?" I asked. "First, you need to understand that you can't go home. They'll be looking for you. By tomorrow morning, your son will have filed a missing persons report. He'll tell the police that you've been showing signs of dementia, that you wandered off during dinner, that he's terrified something has happened to you. Every officer in Vancouver will be looking for a confused old man who doesn't know where he is. So I'm supposed to hide. For now, yes. We need to gather more evidence. I have a lot, but not enough to guarantee a conviction. Whitmore is very careful. He's been doing this for 20 years and he's never been caught." 20 years? Walter reached into another cabinet and pulled out a photograph. It showed an elderly Asian man with a gentle smile. "My father, David Chen. He built a dry cleaning business from nothing. 32 locations across the lower mainland. When my mother died, Whitmore's people moved in. Within 18 months, my father had signed over everything. They put him in a facility in Burnaby. I wasn't allowed to see him. They had a court order saying I was a destabilizing influence on his mental health." His voice cracked. He took a moment to compose himself. "He died alone, calling for me. The nurses told me later that he asked for me every single day. But I couldn't get to him. The legal system that was supposed to protect him was the same system that imprisoned him. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry for me. Be angry. Use that anger to help me bring these people down." I looked around the room at all the boxes, all the files, all the photographs. This man had dedicated years of his life to this mission. He had sacrificed everything. "Why do you trust me?" I asked. "How do you know I won't go to the police? Or back to my son?" "Because I saw your face when I told you about the form in Derek's briefcase. You already suspected something was wrong. You've probably been suspecting it for months. The way he suddenly became interested in your business, the way his wife started visiting you, the way they keep asking about your health, your memory, your medications. You felt it. You just didn't want to believe it." He was right. I had felt it. Little moments of wrongness that I had explained away because I didn't want to face the truth. "What's the plan?" I asked. "Whitmore is receiving an award next week, the Vancouver Business Leader of the Year. There's going to be a ceremony at the convention center. All his clients will be there. All his partners, the mayor, the press. And we're going to expose him in front of everyone. I have recordings, documents, testimonies from nurses who worked at the care homes. But I need one more thing. I need you to get into his office and find the original ledger." "The original ledger?" "Whitmore keeps a handwritten record of every victim. Names, assets, dates of death. It's his trophy collection. He's too arrogant to destroy it. My contact says he keeps it in a safe in his private office. If we can get that ledger, it's over. No judge, no police officer, no politician will be able to protect him. How am I supposed to get into his office?" Walter smiled grimly. "Your son has a meeting with Whitmore on Tuesday morning. You're going to show up instead." The next few days were the longest of my life. Walter had a small bedroom in the back of the house where I slept, though sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my son's face. Derek. The baby I had held in my arms. The boy who used to help me in the hardware store on weekends, sorting nails and sweeping floors. When did he become this person? When did money become more important than his own father? Walter had turned off my phone and removed the battery, saying they could track the location. He gave me a prepaid phone instead, with only one number programmed into it. His number. On Monday, I watched the news. There was a brief segment about a missing senior in North Vancouver. They showed my photograph. My son Derek appeared on screen, his eyes red, his voice shaking. If anyone has seen my father, please contact the police. He has early-stage dementia and we're very worried about his safety. Dad, if you're watching this, please come home. We love you. I felt Walter's hand on my shoulder. Don't let it weaken your resolve. Everything he's saying is calculated. The tears, the trembling voice, it's all part of the performance. He's my son. I know. And that makes what he's doing even worse. On Tuesday morning, I put on a suit that Walter had bought from a thrift store. It didn't fit perfectly, but it was close enough. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. I had aged 10 years in 4 days. Remember, Walter said as I prepared to leave, you're Harold Mackenzie, and you're there to discuss transferring the rest of your assets into the family trust. You've decided that Derek was right. You want to make sure everything is taken care of before your mind gets any worse. What if they recognize that something is wrong? They won't. They see what they want to see. And right now, they want to see a confused old man who's ready to give up. The taxi dropped me at Whitmore's office building in downtown Vancouver. It was a glass tower on West Georgia, 23 floors of law offices and investment firms, the kind of place that made ordinary people feel small and insignificant. The receptionist on the 18th floor smiled warmly when I gave my name. "Oh, Mr. Mackenzie. Yes, we've been expecting you. Your son called ahead. He said you might be a bit confused about the appointment time, but here you are, right on schedule." I forced myself to smile. My memory isn't what it used to be. "Not to worry. Mr. Whitmore will see you shortly. Can I get you some coffee? Tea?" Coffee would be lovely. She led me to a waiting area with leather chairs and mahogany tables. The walls were covered with photographs of James Whitmore shaking hands with important people. The premier, the police chief, various business leaders I recognized from television. I sat down and waited. My heart was pounding so loud I was certain everyone could hear it. 10 minutes later, a door opened and a man walked out. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and tanned, with the polished confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. "Harold," he said warmly, extending his hand. "So wonderful to finally meet you in person. Derek has told me so much about you." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, and his smile was perfect. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Whitmore. Please call me James. We're practically family. Come, let's talk in my office." The office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. A massive oak desk dominated the center of the room. Behind it was a wall of bookshelves, and behind those, I knew, was the safe that Walter had described. "Please, sit," Whitmore said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I'm so glad you've decided to move forward with the trust. Derek has been very concerned about you since Margaret's passing. He's a good son," I said. The words tasted like poison in my mouth. "The best. You raised him well, Harold. Now, I have some documents here for you to review. Nothing complicated. Just transferring your remaining assets into the family trust that Derek has established. This will protect everything in case of any future health issues." He slid a stack of papers across the desk. I picked them up and pretended to read them, though the words blurred together. "I'll need my reading glasses," I said. I left them in my coat. "Of course. Take your time. I'll just step out and let my assistant know to hold my calls." He left the office, closing the door behind him. This was my chance. I moved quickly to the bookshelf. Walter had told me the safe was behind a row of law books on the third shelf. I found it easily enough, hidden behind a false panel. The safe was digital, requiring a 6-digit code. Walter had given me 3 possibilities based on information from his contact inside the office. I tried the first one, Whitmore's birthday. Nothing. I tried the second, his wedding anniversary. Still nothing. My hands were shaking. I could hear voices outside the door. I tried the third code, the date his law firm was founded. The safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of cash, several envelopes, and a leather-bound book. I grabbed the book and flipped it open. Names, dates, dollar amounts, property addresses. And in the margins, small annotations in precise handwriting. David Chen, March 2019, Dry Cleaning Empire, $4. 2M, died September 2021. There were dozens of entries, perhaps hundreds, each one representing a stolen life, a stolen fortune, a broken family. I tucked the book into my jacket just as the door opened. Whitmore walked in, still smiling. Found those glasses? I'm afraid I must have left them at home. My mind, not to worry. I can read the important parts to you. He walked behind his desk, and his eyes flickered to the bookshelf. Just for a moment. Then he looked back at me, and his smile changed. It was still a smile, but there was something cold behind it now. Harold, he said slowly, have you been touching my books? Your books? No, I was just looking at the view, lovely harbor. He sat down, his eyes never leaving my face. Derek called me this morning. He was very concerned. He said his father had been missing for several days. The police are looking for him. And yet here you are, in my office, acting very differently than the confused old man I was expecting. I said nothing. Where's the ledger, Harold? I don't know what you're talking about. He pressed a button on his desk. Security to my office, please. I stood up. It's over, Whitmore. I have the book. I have everything. You have nothing. You're a demented old man who wandered into my office and started raving about conspiracies. By tonight, you'll be in a psychiatric facility where no one will ever believe a word you say. You've done this to so many people. I've helped families manage difficult transitions. That's all. Aging is hard, Harold. Sometimes people need to accept that they can no longer take care of themselves. The door opened and two large men in security uniforms walked in. This gentleman is confused, Whitmore said calmly. Please escort him to the service elevator and hold him there until I can contact his family. The guards moved toward me. I backed away. You can't silence everyone, I said. People know. There's evidence. There's the ramblings of a man with dementia who assaulted my property. That's all anyone will ever see. They grabbed my arms. I struggled, but I was 65 years old, and they were young and strong. They dragged me out of the office and down a hallway to a service elevator. Don't worry, old-timer, one of them said. We'll get you sorted out. They pushed me into the elevator. The doors closed. The elevator began to descend. Then it stopped. The lights flickered and went out. Emergency lighting came on, casting everything in a dim red glow. What the hell? One of the guards said. A voice came through the elevator speaker. Walter's voice. Mr. Mackenzie. There's a hatch in the ceiling. Push it up and climb through. The elevator shaft has a service ladder. Go up to the 19th floor. The door will be unlocked. The guards looked at each other, confused. Who is that? How is he? I didn't wait for them to figure it out. Despite my age, I reached up and pushed the ceiling hatch. It swung open. I grabbed the edge and pulled myself up with strength I didn't know I still had. Hey, get back here. I was already climbing the ladder. My shoulders burned. My knees screamed, but I kept climbing. 19th floor. Just as Walter said, the door was unlocked. I pushed through it and found myself in an empty office space. Construction equipment everywhere. Plastic sheets covering the floors. This way, a voice said. A woman emerged from the shadows. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair and sharp eyes. I'm Elena, Walter's contact. Follow me. We ran through the construction zone to a stairwell at the back of the building, down 6 flights of stairs to a parking garage where a van was waiting. Elena pulled open the side door, and I climbed in. Walter was inside, along with 3 other people I didn't recognize. Do you have it? He asked. I pulled the ledger from my jacket. I have it. The van started moving. We drove out of the garage and into the Vancouver traffic, disappearing into the flow of 1,000 other vehicles. We need to move fast, Walter said. Whitmore will know the ledger is gone within minutes. He'll try to discredit us before we can go public. The ceremony is in 4 days, Elena said. Can we wait that long? We have to. The ceremony is our only chance to expose him in front of everyone who matters. If we go to the police now, it'll get buried. Whitmore has too many connections. Where do we go until then? I have a cabin in Squamish, off the grid. No one knows about it. We drove north, out of the city, and into the mountains. The sky was gray, and it started to rain. Thick drops pattering against the windshield. I sat in the back of the van, clutching the ledger, wondering if I would ever see my home again. The cabin was small but comfortable. There was no internet and no cell service, which was exactly what we needed. Over the next 3 days, Walter and his team prepared for the ceremony. There were 6 of us in total. Walter, Elena, the paralegal, a retired journalist named Robert, who had been investigating Whitmore for years, 2 nurses who had worked at the care homes where Whitmore's victims had been sent, and me. Each of them had a story. Each of them had lost someone. Robert's mother had been a victim 15 years ago. She had owned a successful bakery chain. By the time she died, she didn't even have money for a proper funeral. The nurses, Sandra and Michelle, had witnessed the abuse firsthand. They had seen patients drugged into silence, isolated from their families, neglected until they faded away. They had tried to report it, but no one had listened. One of them had been fired. The other had been threatened with legal action. We were all that was left. The survivors, the witnesses, the ones who refused to forget. On the night before the ceremony, I sat outside the cabin, looking at the stars. It was cold, but the air was clean and sharp. Walter came and sat beside me. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I don't know. I keep thinking about Derek, about what he'll think when he sees me on that stage." "What do you want him to think?" "I want him to feel shame. I want him to understand what he almost did. But mostly I just want to know why. Why wasn't I enough? Why wasn't my love enough?" Walter was quiet for a long moment. My father asked the same thing. At the end, when he finally understood what had happened to him, he asked why. I never had an answer for him. Some questions don't have answers, Harold. Some people are just broken in ways we can't understand. I'm scared. Me too. But we've come too far to turn back now. The next morning, we drove back to Vancouver. The ceremony was at the convention center, a massive complex on the waterfront. Hundreds of guests were arriving in expensive cars, wearing expensive clothes, shaking hands and smiling for photographers. We entered through a service entrance. Elena had credentials from her time at Whitmore's firm. She talked us past security with a story about catering inspection. The main ballroom was already filling up. Round tables covered in white linens. A stage at the front with a podium and a massive screen. A banner that read, Vancouver Business Excellence Awards. James Whitmore was at the center of it all, accepting congratulations, laughing at jokes, looking like a man who had never done anything wrong in his entire life. My son Derek was there too. He was standing near the back of the room, talking to a police officer. They were showing him something on a phone, probably my picture, probably searching for me even now. "Remember the plan," Walter whispered. "We wait until he's at the podium, until the cameras are rolling. Then we go." We split up. Walter positioned himself near the technical booth. Elena went to the back of the room, where she could watch the doors. Robert sat at a table near the front, his phone ready to record. The nurses waited in the wings, ready to testify. I found a spot behind a pillar where I could see the stage without being seen. The ceremony began. There were speeches, awards, standing ovations, and then, finally, the moment we had been waiting for. "And now," the host announced, "the award you've all been waiting for, the Vancouver Business Leader of the Year. This award recognizes an individual who has demonstrated exceptional leadership, innovation, and community service. This year's recipient has built one of the most successful law practices in British Columbia. He has donated millions to charity. He has mentored countless young lawyers. Please welcome to the stage, James Whitmore." The applause was thunderous. Whitmore walked to the podium, waving, smiling, soaking in the adoration. "Thank you," he said, adjusting the microphone. "Thank you all so much. This award means more to me than I can express. When I started my practice 30 years ago, I had one goal: to help families navigate life's most difficult moments. I like to think that I've stayed true to that mission. That was my cue. I stepped out from behind the pillar and walked toward the stage. People turned to look at me. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Dad?" That was Derek's voice. He was pushing through the crowd, his face pale with shock. I ignored him. I kept walking. "What's going on here?" Whitmore said, his smile faltering. "Security?" I climbed the steps to the stage. 2 guards moved to stop me, but Robert stood up and shouted, "Let him speak! Let him speak!" Others joined in. The cameras kept rolling. I reached the podium. Whitmore stepped back, his eyes finally showing fear. "My name is Harold Mackenzie," I said into the microphone. "I own a hardware store in North Vancouver. 3 weeks ago, I was supposed to sign papers that would give my son control of my life. Papers that would declare me mentally incompetent. Papers that would allow James Whitmore and his associates to steal everything I've ever worked for." Gasps from the audience, camera flashes. But I'm not here to talk about myself. I'm here to talk about the 11 people whose names are in this book. I held up the ledger. David Chen. He built 32 dry cleaning locations. He died alone in a care home, calling for a son he wasn't allowed to see. Margaret Thornton. She owned a chain of flower shops. She was drugged into compliance and signed away her life savings. Richard Okonkwo, a real estate developer. He trusted his lawyer, and that lawyer put him in a facility where he was neglected until he died of pneumonia. I read name after name. With each one, I saw faces in the audience, changing. Horror, disbelief, recognition. Some of them knew these people. Some of them had attended their funerals, never knowing the truth. This ledger is James Whitmore's trophy collection. He kept a record of every person he destroyed, every family he tore apart, every dollar he stole. And he kept it because he was proud of what he had done. "This is outrageous," Whitmore shouted. "This man is delusional. He has dementia. His own son has been searching for him." "My son," I said, turning to look at Derek, who had frozen in the middle of the crowd, was part of the scheme. He was going to have me declared incompetent so he could sell my property. Property that's worth $4 million because the city is planning to develop the area. Derek's face went white. Patricia, beside him, looked like she was about to faint. I have witnesses. Nurses who worked in the care homes where Whitmore's victims were sent. A paralegal who documented every meeting, every forged document, every bribe paid to judges and officials. A journalist who has been investigating this for 15 years. Walter stepped forward. Elena stepped forward. Sandra and Michelle stepped forward. Robert held up his phone, showing that he was streaming everything live. "Call the police," I said. "Call the real police, not the ones Whitmore has paid off. Call the RCMP. Call the press. Let them see what this man has done." Whitmore tried to leave the stage, but the crowd had turned. People were blocking his path, shouting at him, demanding answers. I looked at my son across the room. He hadn't moved. Tears were streaming down his face. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why wasn't I enough, Derek? I gave you everything. I would have given you the store, the house, anything you asked for. All you had to do was ask." He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He just stood there, broken, as his entire life collapsed around him. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Not the local police, but the RCMP. Someone in the audience had connections that Whitmore didn't control. By the end of the night, Whitmore was in custody. So was Derek. So was Patricia. The investigation took months. The ledger was authenticated. The nurses testified. Elena's documents were verified. One by one, Whitmore's network of corrupt judges, police officers, and care home administrators was exposed and arrested. In the end, James Whitmore was convicted on 47 counts of fraud, theft, and elder abuse. He was sentenced to 32 years in federal prison. He would die there, alone, just like his victims. Derek received 8 years. He testified against Whitmore in exchange for a reduced sentence. I was told that he showed remorse, that he cried when he heard what had happened to the other victims. I don't know if I believe it. I haven't visited him. I don't know if I ever will. The hardware store sold for $4.2 million. I donated half of it to a foundation Walter established to help elderly victims of financial abuse. The other half I kept for myself. Not because I needed it, but because I had earned it. Walter and I stay in touch. We have dinner once a month, usually at a little Chinese restaurant in Richmond that his father used to love. We don't talk about the case much anymore. We talk about fishing, about hockey, about the weather. But sometimes, when we're sitting there with our plates of chow mein and glasses of tea, I see him looking at his father's photograph. And I know he's thinking about that question. The question that doesn't have an answer. Why wasn't I enough? I'm 65 years old now. I live in a small apartment in North Vancouver with a view of the mountains. I don't have a hardware store anymore. I don't have a son. I don't have Margaret. But I have something I didn't have before. I have the truth. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sunset paints the mountains gold and pink and orange, I think that might be enough. All the best. Remember, sometimes the people who smile the widest hide the darkest intentions. And sometimes, the strangers who reach out in our darkest moments are the ones who save our lives. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and share with someone who needs to hear it. Stay safe out there, and never, ever sign anything without reading it first.